If the if the seller knows that it's in compliance, that means they've gotten a report within the last 6 months, and they have to produce that report. The property is not in compliance with if the seller has or agrees to obtain a report prepared by an inspector. When is that seller going to present that report? Remember, they are under no obligation to have this done in Southern California. So 3B2 is if they know it's in compliance and they have a report from the last 6 months. 3B3 is if it is not in compliance, but the seller is agreeing to get the report. That's 3B, 3B3. All right. So the next part, oh wait, I see there's some questions. Okay. What are the consequences for not filling out this document accurately? The consequences is is that the sale could be rescinded. What would that include your HOA requirements? Yes, that does include HOA for brush clearance. And HOA, yeah, condominiums and such aren't exempt from this.
Rich, what I meant by that question was on the 3A, the local compliance requirement. If that's your HOA, that would constitute for that local requirement?
Yes, it would. And then the seller would say, I don't know if it's in compliance or not because it's the HOA's responsibility. So that just would be the answer there. So yes, and condominiums and stuff are required to do that up in the hills. So 3C is the buyer and seller agreement regarding which party shall obtain compliance with applicable state or local defensible space requirements. Okay, so number 1, buyer responsibility, no local ordinance. Buyer shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible law within 1 year of close of escrow. Number 2, buyer responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which requires compliance as a result of the sale of the property. As I said, in Southern California, it is not required, so you would not ever check number 2, or the seller would not ever check number 2. Number 3, buyer responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which does not require compliance as a result of the sale of the property. Buyer shall obtain documentation of compliance with the state defensible law within 1 year of close of escrow. So if the seller knows that there is a law require them to clear brush, and they're leaving it up to the buyer to do, that's what you would do. That's what you would check. You would check C3, buyer responsibility, local vegetation management ordinance in effect, which does not require compliance as a result of sale of property. Because as I've said time and time again, it is not required in Southern California at point of sale. That doesn't mean it's not going to change and it's not coming, but at this time, we only know of like Truckee and stuff up in Northern California. So for seller's responsibility, once again, it's not a point of sale, so it does not apply to us. Seller responsibility, if the seller has gotten a report in the last 6 months, then the seller would check that that box. Is that the seller's number 5, seller's responsibility, state or local compliance already complete. If only state law applies, seller has obtained documentation of compliance. And number 6 is agreement to obtain. If the seller by some agrees to get this form, then they would check that. I want to stress it is not required. There are brokers out there who are insisting that this is a requirement at point of sale. It is not. It is not a requirement at point of sale to get this report. If the seller wants to get the report, they're more than. How do they get the report? That's a good. I'm gonna ask a question. How do they get the report? It's a good question, Rich. They get the report 2 ways. CAL FIRE. You go to calfire.org, and you can request an inspection. If CAL FIRE says we don't do these inspections, then you can move to your local fire department, your local fire station, and they may do this inspection. So either those are the 2 ways that you can get this report. So that is section 3D, a local agency for which a copy of the documentation may be obtained. Is this doesn't have to be a requirement to provide documentation. Nope, that doesn't. So then the final section is section 4, which is final inspection report disclosure, and that is only checked if the seller has a copy of this report. So that's that. The seller signs and moves on. As I pointed out in the beginning, and I thought that this was if you checked it down here, it was going to check it up there. It evidently does not, at least in this version, maybe in other versions, maybe not through DocuSign, but through digital ink. I'm not sure. I'm sure that this is also part of what is the disclosure? Oh gosh, it went out of my head. You can do your Avid and you can do the TDS through it. Can't remember what the name of it is. One of you know the name of it. Come on, Christine, you know the name. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Wait, repeat it. I didn't hear you.
It's the.
You're talking about Glide?
Glide, yes. I'm sure that this is one of the disclosures that can be done through Glide, and probably answering these questions, it will fill the form out for you. Joan, thank you, Jasmine. Who verifies the accuracy of what the seller indicates on the document? The buyer would verify. If the buyer finds out that it's not true, then it's the buyer that would verify it. We're not responsible for it. This is a form, just like the TDS. We don't fill out the form for the seller. We can guide them as to what they need to do, but that's basically it. All right. So I'm gonna backtrack a little just because I started the recording a little late. Sorry, but the first part of this form is talking about fire hardening, and fire hardening is stuff that makes the house vulnerable to embers and burning. So the seller would fill this out. And once again, it is in the form of, are you aware, just like the TDS and the SPQ. Are you aware of, untreated wood shingles or shakes? Are you aware of combustible landscaping within 5 feet? I mean, they're pretty easy questions to answer, and the seller needs to answer that. And I will say once again, local ordinances, there are local ordinances in place that require that a house, depending on where it is, clear the brush around the house and whatnot. And the seller most likely will know if that is the case, because they probably have been contacted by the city at some point to clear their brush. And as I said before, if you don't clear it, the city will clear it for you and charge you a nice little bill. And also, they probably, that's in a form of a lien against the house, so it would have to be paid at close of escrow. So basically, that's the form, and it's like I said, it's an important form because it does. If a TDS is required on the property, then this form is required, and it does. If it's not provided, or if it's not provided, the only I would think that the only case a buyer would have to rescind is if they didn't do this and it wasn't a high or very high zone, and it wasn't provided, and the buyer found out about it. I mean, I don't see another case of how this could be utilized in order to trigger a rescission, besides not filling it out. I mean, or not providing it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an instance and I really can't. So back just so that everybody saw it who showed up late, and also to share kind of, here we go, to show you on your natural hazard disclosure statement. A lot of them do a summary, and what you're looking for is, and not all of them are the same. They're not, they are not consistent. So this does say a very high fire zone, yes, but also some of them break it down to high fire zone, moderate, and those also will trigger this form. Don't let anybody argue with you about, well, it's just moderate. It says high or very high. I would rather err on the side of caution, because to not deliver this form when it is required, we're talking semantics here. Moderate, high, I mean, it's just the form, and it's just, a disclosure, and there's no requirement of point of sale. So, nobody has to do a report. Nobody has to get the fire department out there. Nobody has to do that in order to sell the property, but you have to supply a form if it applies. And also, once again, I wanted to point out, you need to look at wild land area that may contain substantial forest fire risks and hazards. That also applies and triggers this form. So, I had a question from a TC today. Yeah, Joanne, it is. It's going to be kind of choppy because I forgot, and then I'm kind of going back and forth now. But it is recorded. Somebody asked me, is this, because I made it a required form in all transactions, whether it was in high or very high. It's no longer required. It's only required when it applies, because all of the advisory stuff that was in this form was taken out and put into another form. I would like to see that other form I would like to see you use that other form on an advisory capacity. Let me see if I can find that form. Hold on. I got kicked out of the form. Sorry, anybody have any questions while I'm trying to find them?
Rich, are you talking about the other advisory on car?
Yeah, the I think it's like the wildfire and
there's two. There's another one called Home Fire Hardening Disclosure Advisory, which just has some information. Then there's the Wildfire Disaster Advisory.
I think it's the wildfire disaster. Let me see. What was the other one that you were saying besides the wildfire disaster?
If you put in fire under the car forms, there's two: the fire hardening and defensible space, and then there's another one called Home Fire Hardening Disclosure and Advisory.
Yeah, they've done away with that.
Okay.
So it's the wildfire disaster advisory. And where are you? Hold on. This one, wildfire disaster advisory. So, you know, if it's in an area that, you know, and who knows, you know, what a potential, you know, unless you're in the flats, you're probably not going to get away from a wildfire disaster. I mean, you know, that's why these boundaries are changing. So I would use it if, you know, and it talks about what fire hardening is and all that stuff. So I would use this for use with properties in and around areas affected by wildfire. And also remember it's not required on a lease. Remember that. Also remember what I forgot. It was something good too. Anyways, all right, went out of my head. Any questions on any of these? I don't see any. So sorry that I started the recording in the middle. I think I backtracked and covered everything. So once again, it's a really important form. Let's make sure that sellers are aware of it, and if it is in a high or very high zone, to make sure it's filled out. And I will repeat it again. No, not in Southern California is it required at point of sale. Do not. It is not a required form. So I mean, it's not required to get this report at point of sale. So don't let anybody talk you into that or say it has to be done, because it doesn't. All right, so that's it. My next class is in a couple of weeks. Wait, let me see. It's the 28th, and I may be no, I'm sorry, 27th, Wednesday the 27th. I haven't done the RPA in a while, so I'm gonna do the RPA. So I may futz with the time because it takes me 2 hours to do that. I'll let you know. But that's the 20. What did I just say? Because I just went back to it's the 27th. 27th. Yes. Thank you. All right. So that's it for today. Let me stop the recording.